Hello, good morning. My name is Eduardo Del Signore, and I have beat the often path um, just by trusting my heart, believing in what I feel more than what I think. And as we were like just commenting about this, you remind me about a book that I read many, many years ago called Juan Salvador Gaviota in Spanish, which is translated to Jonathan Livingston Seagull, in which the book is about this particular seagull that goes out of the flock and becomes interested in being itself, right? In this case, himself, because he was Juan, I guess. But so it goes into a journey of discovery of who he is, and what could be his own purpose in life, so that was very inspiring to me. I think I was I was born in Uruguay, in Montevideo. It's pronounced Uruguay, which means the river of the colorful birds. And it's a very peculiar place. Not many people have been there, but it still preserves a lot of uniqueness to it and to its people and its geography. So that kind of like triggered something on me in order to like just find out, because you go around life and it's like there is a piece of the puzzle that is missing. And so I was determined to like find that piece of the puzzle, and finally I did, about 42 years ago. And basically I just came across a wonderful man called Prem Rawat, and he just showed me a way to go inside and look at that piece of the puzzle that was in me. And so from that moment on, my heart became my master, and I've been following it, a little bit. Sometimes it's like the hound dog that is with sniffing his pathway. So yeah, many times it's like in life that you are in situations that is so foggy that you don't even see if there is a floor or a step in front of you. But I have been able to trust my heart enough to like go for it, and then all of a sudden the floor is there, no problem. I didn't fall off the map or anything. So it's an exercise on learning about yourself, and discovering the deepest courage that one could have, and basically just walk in life like that and keep learning. It's a lifelong process, and really I consider myself very fortunate and privileged in a way that I was able to find that in my life, and I'm walking off the beaten path.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we celebrate unique and inspiring success stories to remind us that in a world of doom and gloom, there are still amazing people out there doing incredible things. In short, there's hope. Ha ha! Eduardo Del Signore is a 2020 Grammy-nominated and award-winning musician, and today he leverages technology, science, and music to spur climate action. Through the ClimateMusic Project, Edu used data visuals from climate scientists for his musical interpretation of the fight against climate change, and it's just super cool and beautiful music. Eduardo has gotten back from a performance recently at the World Economic Forum, and today we discuss the clarity of vision that he's had for himself and how he got to this highly unusual, highly rewarding path in his own life. Connecting the dots between seemingly unrelated things is my favorite part of this show, and I know you're going to be deeply inspired by Eduardo Del Signore. It's a pleasure to have you here. Your biography is outstanding, as we talked about before we began taping. It reads like a book, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The bio is crazy, and what is very interesting to me is you outline the different chapters of your life in your bio on your website, and you talk about growing up in Uruguay, and also the things that were symbolic and significant, like the loss of the indigenous people of Uruguay and these things that came from your childhood. Then you had this incredible musical journey And now it seems like you're coming full circle with the elements of your childhood and your music, and you're bringing them all together. And you're also doing incredible things with activism for climate change. So I don't really know where to jump in because there are so many interesting parts of your story. But let's start with the 42 years ago thing. You said 42 years, very exact number. What changed 42 years ago in your life?
I was I found myself in front of a mirror in which I could really see myself, and in a very clear way, and which allowed me to feel peace in my heart. And because of that, peace brings clarity. In my case, I don't know how it's for everybody. This is a very beautiful thing that we're born with. We kind of forget about it. I've been talking about this lately because it's an image that it came to me, like, we're born with it. We're born with everything we need. And in the moment between we take the first breath and a few days or months after we get a name, right? That we start to react to that particular sound, we have an identity already. And in that brief period of time, everything is there: peace, joy, all the qualities. We don't have fears. We don't at that particular moment. We learn a lot of fears along the way that are passed along from generation to generations in what we call tradition. When it's like, um, that's why I think it's so important to beat the path, that often path, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't do, it's like you will never really. I mean, it's supposed. I cannot say never, but it will be hard to really find out who you are, who you really are, and which is not your name or what you do. It's more than that, and it's more beautiful than that. More
Yeah.
vast.
Well,
And
your story certainly exemplifies that, I would say. The
I,
connections that you've been able to find are
yeah,
remarkable.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because there has been times lately that I look back into all the things that happen, and all the places that I have been, situations that have been good, bad, happy, and sad, and it's like, wow. I mean, you know, it's it's kind of like many lifetimes in a way. Yeah.
It sure looks
So
like many lifetimes. I mean, you even won the lottery in Uruguay in
yeah,
the
it is.
70s. So
Yeah.
what happened there? And then you had this moment that you could focus on your music, or you realized that music was the thing that you really wanted to do with your life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was. I was born in a black neighborhood called Ancina. Ancina was a name. It is the name of. Uh, I had to back off a little bit. Uruguay was the first country in the whole Americas that abolished slavery, and it was because mainly because of the work of this man called Jose Gervasio Artigas. He he was betrayed by the Spaniards and the Portuguese, but he liberated the slaves, and the slaves became their own personal army and guard because they love him. And with him, when he left the area because there was no room for him. Um, he was a very clear mirror, and none of the forces that were there dominating the governments or the economy, they didn't like that. So he had to go on an exodus up to the south of Paraguay, close to the Iguazu Falls. And behind him were like thousands and thousands of people that had fought with him on the wars to liberate the country. And his personal guard of 500 uh, ex-slaves, per se, free black people. So one of them became his personal companion, and his name was Ancina. And so there is a neighborhood in Uruguay, which the black communities there call nations, uh, which are distinguished by a few variations on the rhythms they play. The rhythm in general is called candombe, but there are different beats to it. So in Ancina, it's a particular beat, and since I was born there, I listened to the drums playing on the street, going out at any time whenever they wanted. And they lived. The neighborhood was kind of like the neighborhoods in Amsterdam with those tall buildings, with the tiles on the
Yeah.
top. And so it was a whole block, a long block called, that was a street called Encina, and that whole block would become like a resonance box for the drums, and that would go up into the sky, bounce from the clouds on the air, and then you could hear it from many, you know, hundreds of meters away, and that would wake me up when I was a little kid, and that was the call for me for music. That's when I identified music for the first time. You know, it
Yeah.
was exhilarating, and I was 2.5, 3 years old, and I would get out of bed like at midnight when they would come out to play in summer, and I would come out of bed and wake my father up to take me, take me to the drums, and he
Let
would
me
come
see
out
it.
of
Yeah.
bed, get dressed, and would take me, and I would just be in total, how you call it, ecstasy. I didn't know what that was, but I felt amazing. It was this feeling, and it's like I would cry. I didn't know why I was crying, but I loved it. And
Yeah.
that to me is the call of music in my life. Yeah, and then with time and places, I learned to identify that same thing coming from different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what started it for me. That was the call of music from that drumming, that candombe thing.
Yeah. I get it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well, one of the things that I find so fascinating about the journey that you've taken is that clearly from a young age, you also noticed the problems. Like you talk about the loss of the indigenous peoples of Uruguay and a lot of that original culture of Uruguay. And clearly that
yeah,
made you feel something from a very young age, something negative. On the other hand, you have this love of music that's purely positive. What I
yeah,
find so interesting is that you've been able to connect the two, that you're able to
yeah.
stay in a positive headspace and you're able to do what you love with music, but you're still focusing on very real issues such as
Yes,
climate change, such as the loss of indigenous peoples and rights and activism and all of that.
yeah.
So, one of the questions that I always think about on this show is how can we face the very real problems of this world while being happy and optimistic and positive ourselves, which is a conundrum that some might feel.
Well, from my perspective, it's very important to really know who you are, first of all, not in front of other people who judge you, how you dress or what color your skin is or all those things, but to really find your own identity. And so then you don't have to compare yourself to anybody or anything, you know? And then so then you see that most of the problems that we face these days come from the lack of that identity. If people really knew who they are, I mean, what is the need to be killing somebody else in the name of God? I mean, how stupid is that? You know?
Hmm.
I mean, it's like how ironic, how you gonna play God and kill somebody else because you believe in that God or that God, and it's like God doesn't need religion, God doesn't need a temple, you know. God, generator, operator, and destroyer, doesn't need all that crap. Sorry,
No,
but
please, I love it. Let it
so
go.
so it's like but it's essential that we find that peace as individuals, and then as a society that we can understand that we need kindness, that we need common sense, that we need empathy. It's very important, and that's I call those things endangered species in these days.
I
It's
agree.
things that are, if you read what's being written or talked on the news or on the social media, it's like, what?
I know. It's bad.
have do you have any roots? Are you really connected to this planet? I mean, what's going on? And there is the other factor that we have disregarded as societies, the connection between indigenous cultures and the planet. We have disregarded and pushed it aside and killed them, and completely, how you call it, I forget words in English sometimes. It's like a friend of mine, Freddy Ramos. He's an amazing guitarist. He always says, if you hang out long enough with me, you will never. Not only you'll never learn Spanish, but your English is gonna get worse.
Nice.
So native cultures, native people, they have been marginalized. I mean,
Yeah.
I had the chance. I mean, the how you call it, the possibility, and I was invited to perform last week at the World Economic Forum on
I
the
saw that. An incredible video, by the way.
yeah United Nations General Assembly week in New York, and I was sitting next to the foreign affairs minister of Egypt, and we she was great. She's a beautiful person, amazing. We had a great time. I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was, but we kind of like hit it off talking, and we laughed and we had dinner together, and it was great. And then at the end of the day, she gave me her business card, and I read, oh, Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt.
Very
So we
nice.
started talking about, the Egyptian culture, how impressed I was with the bust of Nefertiti in the Berlin Museum of, Egyptian um, things, and she said, oh yes, and there is this thing in the Nile and Luxor and the pyramids and this, and there is so much to explore. If you were impressed by that, you have to come to Egypt. And I said, well, how about the black pharaohs? She didn't know. You know, it has been pushed aside, and it's a pity because they dominated the area before Egypt was Egypt, but they were black, and nobody talks about it.
Mhm.
I did some research because my roommate she makes quilts, and some friends of mine, the family of the people that I represented Dion Warwick for a long time, saw her work, and they asked her for a quilt. And so, we got into the Black Pharaohs theme. So I did research. So I realized, this is incredible. There is a lot of history there, but all the research has been like thrown away because they don't want that to be prevalent, to even like put a shadow on what people consider Egypt to be now. And it's like that's the extent of how we push away all these things. In Uruguay, the history of the native people, the Charruas were called, they were nomads, and they never wanted to mix with the conquerors from Spain or Portugal or anything. It's like they never wanted to deal with that. They loved their own relationship with the land, and that's why they were all killed. You know, with the exception of like three or four that were captured and sent to Paris to be exposed on a cage to see how the savages lived in South America.
Yeah, I saw that.
it's,
Heartbreaking stuff.
it's like wow.
Right.
So you know, and it hasn't changed much. It hasn't
No.
changed much. This globalization is really making people more dumb, and you know, so that's why it's so important to really get to know who you really are. I really, doctor recommends it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I mean,
completely agree. And
there is joy on knowing your own nature. There is a lot of joy. There is so much to dig. There is a treasure like waiting for each one of us inside in our hearts. So it's wonderful. We cannot live without that. You know, we all have it,
I
but it's
do.
dormant.
Suffering is nothing new, but it's what people do
Well,
with it that is the most remarkable thing. And that you've been able to find your unique voice and spread your message in the way that you have, it's just that's what drew me to your story. Because the first piece that I saw, and what many people might know you from now, including why you're at the World Economic Forum, is because you have visualized climate change with music, which is just a very fascinating concept to begin with. I think not a lot of people have an idea like that in their head, but you're drawing connections between things that other people aren't seeing connections between. So
well,
how have you been able to do that? Is that a conscious choice, something you've been exploring? Is that something that just pops up in your head?
no. Well, I mean, yes and no. I was approached by an organization from San Francisco called the ClimateMusic Project, and what they do is they link together scientists that study the causes and effects of climate change with composers, right? So they give the composers. They contacted me and they say, well, we have three ways of working. You either I had to back off a little bit. It's like they do their studies. You choose the areas that you want to work with, and I chose the change of temperature, the reabsorption of carbon dioxide, and the investment on renewable energies. in contrast with business as usual, right? So they
I
create
see.
graphics for a span of like 100, 150 years, sometimes up to 200, with a projection all the way to 2050, in which you have two outcomes. If we don't do anything, it's business as usual. How things have been or regressing in a way because it's going on the wrong direction, and or if we become active about it and we start investing more in renewable energy and creating ways of like capturing the carbon dioxide back, you know, because the Earth resources are not infinite. It's big, but it's like I've been comparing the situation of the world right now to, like, let's say you have a nice house and you bring your car into the living room, you turn the engine on and close all the windows and leave it running 24 hours a day. It's limited, isn't it? So we have been doing that with Earth for over 100 years, since the beginning of, the Industrial Revolution. So that's where common sense common sense comes into the picture.
Yeah.
So anyway, the thing is, like, when they approached me, eh, I said, they asked me, what do you think is the main cause of all these problems? And I said, well, the human condition, you know. So I approached from that angle. So then they created these graphics with the studies of all the topics and everything that's been going on and what could happen if we start acting. Um, the graphics are transformed into numbers, mathematical progressions, because the graphics go up, or
Hmm.
down, depending, and those mathematical progressions with a program they have, they are transformed into musical notes. So by themselves, they're not very musical. So they offer me three possibilities. I either write something starting from those notes, I would compose a piece of music and then incorporate those sounds, or forget about those sounds and just write something about what you think is going on. So I took the second option, and they provided me with what they call sonifications, and I had to. I created this piece of music. It was a process that had two chapters. I created a long suite. It was a 17-minute piece of music called Discovery Realization. And it was kind of like storytelling of one person, realizing what was going on and, what needed to be done, and then doing it and then coming to a nice positive outcome. And it was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful and they liked it a lot. But then some of the scientists came up with different charts, and then the new sonifications wouldn't fit
Mm.
the musical approach that I had done. So I would have to, I didn't want to like rearrange the music, so I wrote another piece, and that's what Odyssey is. Um, and then yeah, so I the whatever is coming out of those graphics is with the sound of acoustic Steinway piano, and everything else is what I created, and that is kind of like being the vessel to bring forth that message. I don't know if you have seen the whole video.
I only saw the part of it, but it looked it sounded great too. Beautiful piece of
Yeah,
music.
I don't know. I'm just waiting for them to release it. I have given the priority because they have been very kind and they came up with the concept. I think that coming into it from the side of the human condition really created a big impact, particularly from what happened in New York. Because I was performing at a big dinner with the president of the World Economic Foundation and his wife, and the dignitaries from different countries and CEOs from the big multinationals, and the whole purposes of the meeting was to let them know that if they don't do something, they are
Right.
not going to have a world to explore and squeeze money out of. So then I had the idea of improvising with my bass on top of what was being that I had already recorded and the video. And there was a particular moment that made it more dimensional, more three-dimensional, because it was being improvised, but at the same time it was live and it was filmed and recorded. So it created like a different thing that they could like really grasp, and they got into it so much that it was a part halfway through the song that I pick up my bow. I have a bass bow, and I started bowing my 16 bass, the electric, with my pedals, and then all of a sudden the environment completely changed, and as the music was playing on the video, and the room went completely silent. Silent, 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 and the whole thing was in a ballroom that you could hear the waiters with the plates and this and that, and then people on the next room like rah 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 rah. It's like all of a sudden we were in a bubble of silence, and it's just those things that happen. I mean, I wasn't planning on it, but it happened, and it was from not just from me, but from everybody. You know, so everybody felt a part of something, and they were touched. So when I finished, it was a beautiful standing ovation, and the wife of the president, Miss Schwab, Hilde Schwab, she stood up and came to me and said, "Did you see what happened?" And I said, "Are you talking about the silence?" And she said, "Yes." I mean, I was playing, the music was playing, but everything else was like an incredible environment of silence. And I said, "Yeah, yeah, it was amazing." And so she said, "Yes, I really needed that because everything is so noisy." And I mean, that was really beautiful. And everybody was very thankful. Even Klaus Schwab, which is the president of the whole thing, he, I was sitting next to him, and he didn't know who I was in the beginning. But after I performed, he was like really happy. Came and hugged me and this and that. And anyway, so that's the importance of bringing music into any of these things that are happening. It makes it more palpable, more in a way. It makes you feel like it's your problem too.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean?
I
It's
do,
like
yeah.
if you hear a happy song, then you feel happy, right?
Right.
So if you have an experience because of what I did in conjunction with all the work we did with the scientists and climate music people and the video maker Angelo is a wonderful Italian man that lives in Paris. It's like all of a sudden people get touched, and then it's like that to me is success. You know, I don't have a big bank account, but that to me is an incredible fortune.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guardian of the fortune part that I'm carrying on my name. It's like it's so important, for me to achieve those things, and if I awaken the possibility of somebody thinking at that moment that all of a sudden there is space, there is clarity, there is silence, and it's like, oh, there are more options. So and then maybe the question comes and it says, what can I do?
Yeah.
And you can do anything you want, really.
That's what we're talking about on this show. That's
Yeah,
the subtitle of the
exactly.
show. You could do anything you want, really.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
exactly what I'm trying to say every
there you
week,
go.
every day. You can do anything you want, really. You can even
You see,
put
we meet
music
on
to
the
climate change.
yeah, we
Yeah,
meet on the path, and
that's
uh,
right.
I remember a friend, somebody asked a very wise man, friend of mine. He said, what do we need to do to have peace in the Middle East? And he said, nothing. Just stop doing what you're doing, right? I mean, it's
Yep.
like, cut it out. You know? I mean, who do you think you are? I mean, so, and
Right.
it's like, and as far as nature goes, um, I used to call the piece wrinkled science because during the pandemic, that first year that it was a lockdown in the world, nature was like, it exploded, and it just came back to life in many places and forms that it put a wrinkle on the graphics as far as
It
I'm
did.
concerned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so it's like, what do we need to stop climate change? Nothing. Just stop doing what you're doing.
Just
Find,
stop driving. Yeah. And
yeah,
then all these people want to get everybody back to the office. It's like, no, 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 no. Get them off the road. Stop the cars
Well,
on the road. Stop the
yeah,
commute.
but if you go deep into the whole thing, is like, what is the root of all these things? In the financial world, in the new world order, the whole thing is greed. Greed is what? It's fear. It's just
Yeah,
fear based.
right.
I mean, how much is enough? I mean,
Yeah.
do you think Elon Musk has enough time on his life to count his bills? There is no
Nope.
way he can even, start counting now, and maybe his grandkids or great grandkids can't finish counting the money. And the same with all these super ultra rich people and companies. It's like, what are you trying to do? What is your purpose?
And yeah, that's the whole point. But I think it's like two people on a spaceship that's crashing into the sun, and they're arguing about which color shirt they should be wearing. And one of them is wearing a red shirt, one of them is wearing a blue, and they're just fighting to the death over what shirt. And it's like, guys, you're both gonna
Yeah,
crash into the sun, whichever shirt you're
mm,
wearing. So stop
yeah,
it. Who
yeah,
cares what
exactly.
other people are doing? Like, why do you need to go out of your way to bully somebody who is trans or who's from a different ethnicity? Why do you focus on that when there are problems that affect all of us, no matter what
Yeah,
color your skin is, no matter what your background is? Why don't we
right.
focus on that? And it takes determination for people like you and me to keep reminding ourselves and to recenter ourselves and to say, this is what matters. This is what matters. This is what matters, because it's so easy to get distracted by all these blinking lights and things that don't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there is what this society has created is a lot of existentially lazy people. You know, I mean, they would spend hours and days waiting for the new iPhone, but not a pinch of time just to try to realize who they really are, or even to stop and say "I love you" to somebody they love. You know, it's just the people tend to take people, even their own family and kids and everything. People tend to take people as for granted, and it's like,
Hmm.
and it's so important to have the time to sit at the table with your family and share a meal, or just if you really love somebody, just say "I love you." What's wrong with that? I mean, you don't have time, really? You never had time. Time has you. Remember that.
Hmm.
So, uh, so, and the other part of the analogy of the people going into the sun was remind me of another one. That was it was this airplane, and it's a passenger plane, and this guy was running up and down on the corridor of the plane, and the flight attendant said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, no, I'm on a hurry. I get there. I want to get there fast."
Yeah, exactly. I'm in a hurry. I'm in a rush. That's exactly what it is. Like, nope, you're going in the same place we all are, buddy, whether you realize it or not. Yeah. Just one more time, what you're doing is incredibly noble. I think the mission is fantastic. I'm glad that you're getting the opportunity to present your beliefs on a larger stage. I'm glad that people are taking notice, because how do we break through that noise? Somebody like me, my answer is to talk, 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 talk. Somebody like George Carlin, talk faster. Your answer is to slow down, embrace the silence, fill a room with silence, and let other people's
Yeah,
voice come in. And that's really
yeah.
powerful and cool.
There was one of the girls from the World Economic Foundation Forum. She said that she heard a podcast that I did a while ago, and the interviewer asked me. Uh, she wanted to gossip about the lottery thing, but I completely forgot about it, and it's not important. It was important on its time, but now it's a long time gone. And and she asked me what were the two most important moments that changed your life. And this girl reminded me of that. I forgot that I say that, and according to her, what I said was the day I took my first breath was the first most important moment of my life. And then later on, years later, the moment I realized I was breathing. Because do we do we know we're breathing? We don't. We forget.
No,
I
we
forget.
completely
I keep
forget.
forgetting. I had to
Yeah.
remind myself every morning. I'm awake. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It feels
Right, there
good.
we go.
Yeah.
Because you could just take a bite of a sandwich and go, oh, and then suddenly you're not anymore. Oops, that was
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
you immediately learn your priorities,
Yeah,
and it's
dang
not
it.
it's not about gluten free.
No, exactly right. Gluten breathe.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
sir, I wish you the best of luck this week. It has been an absolute joy to get to know you. I won't take up any more of your time. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sitting with me. Any last thing that you want to promote real quick? I'll let you close this episode down.
Well, we are closing a chapter at this place in Santa Monica, La Puglia. We've been supporting artists that were affected by the pandemic with a concert series that started in November of last year. There are many initiatives that we are promoting, and we're doing it out of thin air. There is the food recovery program thing we do, in which we have already distributed about 400,000 pounds of food to people in need since the beginning of the pandemic, and it's still going. So check on the A Call to Peace Foundation, and check on climatemusic.org, and a call number two peace.org. And just follow. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to put any money anywhere. Just maybe you get inspired, and if you have initiatives, you can contact us. We're a group of Grammy-nominated artists, Oscar-winning artists, um, and we're happy to participate and help out with bringing music to your cause. So anyway, that's it. Thank you so much, Ross, for reaching
Beautiful.
out, and stay in touch, please.
I will. The pleasure's all mine. I'm wishing you a fantastic rest of your week. You've got a big week ahead of you. May it all go smoothly and be a joy. And with that, the official podcast is over.